8:46 a.m., New York City, New York. American Airlines Flight 11 is allegedly flown into the North Tower by Mohammed Atta. This is the widely known video of the attack, shot by Jules Naudet. At face value, it may not look like much. However, upon closer inspection, in case you missed it, one more time. If you look closely, you'll notice that the shadow of the plane meets the building after the flash occurs. This means that the flash is not the fuselage colliding with the building, but rather a separate event. Not to mention that the flash is twice as wide as the fuselage itself. Within minutes of the attack, news teams from all over the city had their cameras trained on the World Trade Center. Therefore, the second impact was covered by almost every conceivable angle. This footage was shot by CNN. On the underside of the fuselage, an extra piece of equipment is visible. When questioned about this, Boeing representatives refused to discuss it due to national security. This is what the underside of a Boeing 767 should look like. The following footage is taken from the documentary Why the Towers Fell. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Bring it back. Did you catch that? A missile is fired seconds before impact. Skeptics claim that the flash is the fuselage colliding with the building. If that were the case, it would look like this. Also, notice that the flash is reflected in the fuselage of the plane. The flash is also present in footage taken by Evan Fairbanks, Jennifer Spell, CNN. Al-Qaeda certainly couldn't have added this equipment at Logan International Airport. And even if they did, the flight crew would have noticed it. So where did this plane come from?
The first question I have is basically to get from you a sense of how you would rate the American media in their coverage of the events of the attack last September.
Well, let's see. Shamefully is a word that comes to mind.
This just in, you were looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
But overall, the American journalism was cowed and intimidated by this patriotic orgy. You know, if you criticize the president, it's unpatriotic and there's something wrong with you, you may be a terrorist.
So in that sense, there's not enough room for dissenting voices?
Well, there's plenty of room. There's just not enough people are willing to take the risk.
Jim, I don't know whether we've confirmed that this was an aircraft, or to be more specific, some people said they saw a missile.
There was definitely a blue logo. It was like a circular logo on the front of the plane. It definitely did not look like a commercial plane. I didn't see any windows on the side.
Mark, if what you say is true, those could be cargo planes. You said you didn't see any windows in the side?
I didn't see any windows on the side. It was not a normal flight that I've ever seen at an airport. It was a plane that had a blue logo on the front, and it did not look like it belonged in this area.
It's just sort of a herd mentality, a lemming-like mentality. If you don't go with the flow, you're anti-American and therefore a suspect.
This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way!
you sort of wonder when something like that happens, well, who stands to benefit? You know, who had the opportunity and the motive? You just kind of look at these basic things. I don't assume that I know the truth about what went on that day. And, yeah, I just look around and looking for, well, who had the motive, who had the opportunity, who had the equipment, who had the will. I spent enough time on the inside of, well, the White House, and I've been in, campaigns, and I've known enough of the people who do these things to know that the public version of the news of an event is never really what happened. And these people, I think, are willing to take that even further.
Are you sort of suggesting that this worked in the favour of the Bush administration?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Arlington, Virginia. Hani Hanyor allegedly executes a 330-degree turn at 530 miles per hour before piloting American Airlines Flight 77 into the ground floor of the Pentagon, knocking over telephone poles and bouncing off the lawn before impact. First, let's meet Hani Hanyor. Hanyor had come to Freeway Airport in Bowie, Maryland 1 month earlier seeking to rent a small plane. However, when Hanyor went on 3 test runs in the second week of August, he had trouble controlling and landing a single-engine Cessna 172.
Well, my name is Marcel Bernard, and I'm the chief flight instructor here at Freeway. Hani Hanyor, well, basically what happened with him is he showed up at the airport and wanted to get checked out in the aircraft. See, he was already certified. He didn't come to us for flight training.
Yeah, he already had a pilot's license.
He had already earned his private instrument commercial at a school in Arizona, and I don't remember the name of the school, but already had certificates in hand. And we sometimes occasionally have pilots that come to us that don't want flight training but just want to rent our aircraft.
Which is the case of Hani Hanyor.
This was the case for Hani. He wanted to get checked out, as we call it, to rent our aircraft. And our insurance requires that he flies with one of our instructors to be found competent to rent. Mm-hmm. And that was the process that he was going through.
And that was in the second week of August, right?
I believe so. I don't remember the exact dates, but a couple months before 9/11. Certainly after the fact, we found out they were staying in a hotel on Laurel, supposedly. And,
Laurel, Maryland?
Yeah. Some of the others that were involved. But he had come to us to get checked out in the airplane. So we usually take him out to the practice area and have him do a little air work. Mm-hmm. And then certainly come back to the airport and accomplish a bunch of takeoffs and landings and that sort of thing. And sometimes we practice emergencies and those kinds of things, and do those kinds of maneuvers so we can find him competent or be comfortable to rent him an aircraft. Mm-hmm. And satisfy the insurance requirements. In his case, he was having problems with the landing phase.
How was he when he was just behind the controls and flying?
When I talked to both instructors that flew with him, the consensus was that he was very quiet, average or below average piloting skills. English was very poor, so I don't know that's about the best description I can give you for his demeanor at that time. Very, uneventful from my perspective.
Regardless, air traffic controllers at Dulles International Airport that were tracking Flight 77 all thought that it was a military plane. Second, you only have to look at the photos from that day to realize that whatever hit the Pentagon did not bounce off the lawn. If Flight 77 had crash-landed and skidded into the Pentagon, it would have looked like this. Instead, it looked like this, without a single scratch on the lawn. Third, why are the downed light poles thrown away from the Pentagon, not towards it, and the bases are ripped out completely? There is no indication that these were bent or damaged by a Boeing 757 traveling at 530 miles per hour. Instead, they seem to have just popped out of the ground. Fourth, why is the damage to the Pentagon completely inconsistent with a Boeing 757? If a Boeing 757 hit the Pentagon at full speed, the wings would rip off outside, sending the fuselage inside the building. Why is there absolutely no trace of the wings outside? In fact, why are there no pieces of the aircraft at all? Not one seat cushion, engine, vertical stabilizer, nothing. 100 tons of titanium, steel, and aluminum gone. The only pieces of debris on the front lawn of the Pentagon were light enough to have been carried by hand, and employees from the Pentagon were seen carrying away a large box shrouded in a blue tarp. What was in that box? Why weren't we allowed to see it? But don't take my word for it. Listen to CNN's Jamie McIntyre as he reports live from the Pentagon.
You know, it might have appeared that way, but from my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon. The only site is the actual site of the building that's crashed in, and as I said, the only pieces left that you can see are small enough that you could pick up in your hand. There are no large tail sections, wing sections, a fuselage, nothing like that anywhere around, which would indicate that the entire plane crashed into the side of the Pentagon.
The official explanation is that the intense heat from the jet fuel vaporized the entire plane. I called Boeing to get the exact construction details of a 757. However, the operator informed me that Boeing refuses to give out any information regarding the construction of their aircraft, due to the attacks of September 11th. But what we do know is that a 757 has two Pratt & Whitney engines made of titanium alloy, which are 9 feet in diameter, 12 feet long, and weigh 6 tons each. Titanium has a melting point of 1,688 degrees Celsius. Jet fuel, in a pure oxygen environment, will burn at a maximum of 1,000 degrees Celsius. Therefore, it is scientifically impossible that 12 tons of titanium was vaporized by kerosene. Likewise, the two engines should have been found intact at the Pentagon. Instead, there was a single turbojet engine approximately 3 feet in diameter found inside the building. After these photos were published by American Free Press, readers wrote in to suggest that the turbine was a piece from the APU mounted in the tail section of a Boeing 757. Chris Bolin contacted Honeywell in Phoenix, Arizona, and sent them high-resolution photos of the disc. An expert, speaking on the condition of anonymity, told Bolin that there's no way that that's an APU wheel. Bolin then contacted Pratt & Whitney and Rolls-Royce, the two companies that manufacture 757 engines. Pratt & Whitney pointed Bolin towards Rolls-Royce, and John W. Brown, a spokesman for Rolls-Royce, replied, "It is not a part from any Rolls-Royce engine that I'm familiar with." In an article written by Carl Schwartz, he states that the engine is a JT-8D turbojet engine from a U.S. Air Force A-3 Skywarrior. The piece shown in the FEMA photo is the front shaft bearing housing. Jet engines have a center shaft which must be balanced, as well as bear seals on the front and back. The FEMA photo shows the front seal and a rotor hub missing its fan blades. These particular blades are easily removed in a collision such as the one at the Pentagon. The United States Air Force has only a few A-3s left in operation, and they are stored in Van Nuys, California at Hughes Aircraft, which is now better known as Raytheon. The second identifiable piece of debris at the Pentagon is a diffuser case. Skeptics have claimed that this is proof that Flight 77 hit the Pentagon. Let's look a little closer at the diffuser case of a 757. Do you see the triangular bezels around the openings? Those bezels are nowhere to be found on the diffuser case found at the Pentagon. The third and final piece of identifiable debris is a wheel hub. This particular wheel is made by B.F. Goodrich's Aerospace Division. They also manufacture the wheels for the 757, but a wheel hub from a 757 has a much larger radius-to-width ratio. This tire is used for carrier-based and general rear wheels of smaller military planes, not commercial airliners. No matter where this debris came from, it did not come from a 757, period. But let's forget the debris. Let's look at the damage that was done to the Pentagon. The 767s that hit the World Trade Center left a very distinct outline of a commercial airliner. Therefore, we should expect something similar at the Pentagon. The following photos were taken before the outer wall of the Pentagon had collapsed. The only damage to the outer wall of the Pentagon is a single hole, approximately 16 feet in diameter. Are we supposed to believe that a Boeing 757, weighing almost 100 tons, disappeared into this hole without leaving any wreckage on the outside? But let's say that the fuselage of the plane caused this 16-foot hole. Why is there no damage where the wings, or the vertical stabilizer, or the engines would have slammed into the building? Why are the windows next to the hole completely intact? Remember the dimensions of the engines on a 757? 9 feet in diameter, 12 feet long, and 6 tons each. If 6 tons of titanium slammed into the Pentagon at 530 miles per hour, they would bury themselves inside the building. And yet the only damage on the outside of the Pentagon is this single hole, with no damage from where the engines would have hit the building. And as for the inside of the Pentagon, there's another hole, approximately 16 feet in diameter, found on the other side of the C-ring, 3 rings from the impact. For that hole to have been caused by Flight 77, the Boeing would have had to smash through 9 feet of steel-reinforced concrete. The nose of a commercial airliner is composed of lightweight carbon. This is what usually happens to the nose of a commercial airliner in a plane crash. If the nose caused this hole, why is there absolutely no trace of it? So what could blow a 16-foot hole on the outer wall of the Pentagon, smash through 9 feet of steel-reinforced concrete, and leave another 16-foot hole? A cruise missile. This is what Slobodan Milosevic's residence in Belgrade looked like after a Tomahawk cruise missile had hit it. See any similarities? Fifth, eyewitness accounts from the Pentagon tell one of 2 different stories. The huge 100-ton commercial airliner.
I looked off, looked out my window, I saw this plane, a jet, American Airlines jet coming.
Or the small 8 to 20 passenger commuter plane.
So what looked to be maybe a 20 passenger corporate jet, no markings on the side.
Some people describe the plane flying directly over their cars before slamming into the Pentagon. This is what happens when a car gets too close to the wake of a commercial airliner. These people should have been blown off of the highway. And a number of people describe a plane flying overhead almost immediately after the crash. Sixth, surveillance cameras from a nearby gas station and Sheraton Hotel would have captured the entire thing. Why was the FBI there within minutes to confiscate the tapes, including a warning for the employees not to discuss what they had seen? If the government wishes to prove once and for all that Flight 77 hit the Pentagon, All they would have to do is release one of those tapes. Instead, they released 5 frames from a camera across the heliport, even though none of them show a Boeing 757. And finally, why do satellite photos taken 4 days before 9/11 show a white marking on the front lawn, marking almost the exact trajectory of whatever hit the Pentagon 4 days later? And is it merely a coincidence that the Pentagon was hit in the only section that was renovated to withstand that very same kind of attack? And that Donald Rumsfeld was safe in his office on the opposite end of the building? If the government has nothing to hide, why are they so afraid to answer a few questions or release a few videos? (9:59), New York City, New York. The South Tower of the World Trade Center collapses to the ground in approximately 10 seconds. 29 minutes later, the North Tower follows suit, collapsing in approximately 10 seconds. Later that evening at 5:30, World Trade Center 7 suddenly collapses. The building's tenants include the CIA, the Secret Service, and Rudy Giuliani's emergency bunker, and the SEC was using it to store 3,000 to 4,000 files related to numerous Wall Street investigations. The official explanation is that falling debris created an internal fire, which ignited several fuel tanks inside the building. If this is true, then it would be the 3rd building in history to collapse because of a fire. The first 2 would be the Twin Towers. On August 5th, 1970, a 50-story office building in New York burned for more than 6 hours. It did not collapse. On May 4th, 1988, a 62-story skyscraper in Los Angeles burned for 3 hours and spread over 4 floors. It did not collapse. On February 23rd, 1991, a 38-story skyscraper in Philadelphia, built in 1973, burned for more than 19 hours and spread over 8 floors. It did not collapse. On October 17, 2004, a 56-story skyscraper in Venezuela, built in 1976, burned for more than 17 hours and spread over 26 floors, eventually reaching the roof. Guess what? It did not collapse. And yet, on September 11, 2001, 2 110-story skyscrapers, completed in 1973, burned for 56 and 74 minutes, respectively, over 4 floors, before collapsing completely to the ground. One might argue that this was due to the construction of the World Trade Center. Let's look at what was inside those buildings. The Twin Towers were composed of 200,000 tons of steel, 425,000 cubic yards of concrete, 103 elevators, 43,600 windows, 60,000 tons of cooling equipment, and a 360-foot television antenna. The North Tower was completed in 1970, standing at 1,368 feet tall, and the South Tower was completed in 1973, clocking in at 1,362 feet tall, making them the tallest buildings in the world until the Sears Tower was completed in 1974. And to think, the federal government would have us believe that these massive structures were destroyed by 10,000 gallons of jet fuel. However, eyewitnesses, video footage, and a little common sense quickly refutes that claim. Flight 175 hit the South Tower between the 78th and 82nd floors at 9:02 a.m. Barely hitting the southeast corner, the majority of the jet fuel exploding outside a massive fireball. Yet, this tower collapsed first, even though the North Tower was hit straight on and had already been burning for a half hour longer. If you dropped a basketball off the top of either tower at the precise moment they began collapsing, the roof and the basketball would hit the ground at the exact same moment. So if jet fuel didn't bring down the World Trade Center, then what did? Numbers of reporters and eyewitnesses described explosions following the impacts and preceding the tower's collapses.
There were 2 or 3 similar huge explosions, and the building literally shook. You literally shook at the base of this building.
Yes, I was right there. I was down in the basement, came down, all of a sudden the elevator blew up, smoke. I dragged the guy out, his skin was hanging off, and I dragged him out, and I helped him out to the ambulance.
As he takes these pictures. Jim?
Yes, I am here, Michael.
Jim, tell us what's happening out there.
We just witnessed some kind of secondary follow-up explosion on the World Trade Center #2.
The FBI is here, as you can see. They had roped this area off. They were taking photographs and securing this area just prior to that huge explosion that we all heard and felt.
The 2 towers literally collapsed. I was making my way to the foot of the World Trade Center. Suddenly, while talking to an officer who was questioning me about my press credentials, we heard a very loud blast, an explosion. We looked up, and the building literally began to collapse before us.
There was 5 blocks from the World Trade Center, and we were standing here when there was some sort of collapse or explosion. And to me, it sounded like an explosion. Then the building, the rolling sound sounded like the building collapsed. Were there other people?
When I try to say people, the moment we heard a big explosion coming down, everything just went black. Everything came down, glass started popping, people got hurt, stuff went on top of them, and it was a big explosion. Everything got dark, real dark.
We just saw that as well. The second tower, the only one that was standing, tower #1, we saw some kind of explosion, a lot of smoke come out of the top of the tower, and then it collapsed down onto the streets below.
David Lee, what can you tell us?
John, just seconds ago there was a huge explosion, and it appears right now the second World Trade Tower has just collapsed.
Trying to get some of the people out, but then there was those secondary explosions and then the subsequent collapses. So I don't know how many people were in there. I know there was.
They also noted how the collapses looked exactly like a controlled demolition.
One of those almost looks like one of those planned implosions, but of course there was nothing planned.
The second building that was hit by the plane has just completely collapsed. The entire building has just collapsed, as if a demolition team set off. When you see the old demolitions of these old buildings, it folded down on itself, and it is not
10 o'clock Eastern Time this morning, just collapsing on itself. This is a place where thousands of people work. We have no idea what caused this. If you wish to bring anybody who's ever watched a building being demolished on purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the under infrastructure of a building and bring it down.
One eyewitness was standing with a crowd of people on Church Street, 2.5 blocks from the South Tower, when he saw a number of brief light sources being emitted from inside the building between floors 10 and 15. He saw about 6 of these flashes, accompanied by a crackling sound before the tower collapsed. Jenny Carr was attending a business meeting on the 36th floor of One Liberty Plaza, across the street from the World Trade Center, and caught the entire first attack on tape. A second explosion could be heard 9 seconds after the crash.
Sound like something crashed.
The windows in the lobby of the North Tower were blown out, and marble panels were blown off of the walls. This was brushed off as an explosion from a raging fireball that went barreling down the elevator shafts. However, there is no soot, no fire, no fuel residue. Instead, the entire lobby is coated with a fine dust, which is the signature of high explosives. Mike Pecoraro was working in the 6th sub-basement of the North Tower when the first plane struck. Mike and his friend descended to the sea level, and when they arrived, they found that the machine shop was gone. There was nothing there but rubble. We're talking about a 50-ton hydraulic press. Gone. They saw a perfect line of smoke streaming through the air. You could stand here, and 2 inches over you couldn't breathe. The two made their way to the parking garage, but found that that too was gone. There were no walls, there was rubble on the floor, and you couldn't see anything. They went up 2 more levels to the building's lobby. As they reached the B level, they were astonished to see a steel and concrete fire door that weighed about 300 pounds, wrinkled up like a piece of aluminum foil on the floor. The whole lobby was soot and black, elevator doors were missing, the marble was missing off of some of the walls, the west windows were all gone, broken glass everywhere, the revolving doors were all broken and their glass was gone. Every sprinkler head was going off. Could an explosion 90 floors above cause uniform damage to the lobby and sub-basements of the North Tower? But don't take their word for it. Ask the Fire Department of New York. First, we have this interview from the Naudet brothers documentary on 9/11.
It was like crossing the woods. There was nobody there. Where the fuck? What did we do? We made it outside. We made it about a block.
We made it at least two blocks, and we started running. Floor by floor, instead of popping out.
It was like, it was if they had detonated.
Detonated.
If they were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
All the way down. I was watching it and running. Just ran up West. And then you just sort of this cloud of shit chasing you down.
Couldn't outrun it.
West Street. I couldn't outrun it.
In these interviews, numerous firefighters from Ladder 7 describe a loud explosion preceding the collapses, not to mention extensive damage to the lobby of the North Tower.
I heard a loud boom. And my first thing, I was right at the desk there on the left-hand side when you come into Tower 1. And I walked out, I didn't go out. I walked to where all the doorway was, the glass were broken, and I looked out, and I seen in the building across the street, I seen the shadow coming, I seen just the shadow in the building across the street coming down. And I
wasn't expecting to see the damage that I saw in the lobby and the people, the bodies, the burnt people, the injured people. I really wasn't prepared for that.
The lobby is about 6 stories high, and the lobby looked as though a bomb had exploded there. All the glass was taken out. There were 10-foot by 10-foot marble panels that were once walls. They were loose from the wall of the Trade Center.
I went around by the freight elevator and I could see it was just blown. It was just a giant 30th floor. We hear another explosion. And at that time we heard a huge explosion.
Firefighter Louis Caccioli told People Weekly on September 24th, "I was taking firefighters up in the elevator to the 24th floor to get in position to evacuate workers. On the last trip up, a bomb went off. We think there were bombs set in the building." Then in the radio transmissions from September 11th, firefighters reported numerous additional explosions going off within the buildings.
I got an eyewitness who said there was an explosion on floor 7-8. 7-8. We just had another explosion.
Warren Street because of the secondary explosion. We've got numerous people covered with dust from the secondary explosion.
And we got another explosion on the tower, 1013. 1013 down 2 has had a major explosion and what appears to be a complete collapse surrounding the entire area. Who's involved in the secondary explosion at Tower 1?
Moments ago, I spoke to the chief of safety for the New York City Fire Department. He received word of the possibility of a secondary device, that is another bomb going off, but he said that there was another explosion which took place, and then an hour after the first hit here, there was another explosion that took place. He thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building. We are continuing to hear explosions here downtown, and what we've been...
Chief Palmer had reached the fire on the 78th floor of the South Tower and devised a plan to put it out.
1-5. We got 2 isolated pockets of fire. We should be able to knock it down with 2 lines. Where you know that? 78th floor, numerous 1045 call horns.
If the 78th floor was a raging inferno like the government would have us believe, then Palmer wouldn't have gotten as far as he did, and certainly wouldn't have been able to put it out. Kevin Ryan, an employee at Underwriters Laboratories, the company that certified the steel components that were used in the World Trade Center, sent a letter to Frank Gale of the National Institute of Standards and Technology, arguing that the steel used in the World Trade Center met all the standards for resistance against a fire. We know that the steel components were certified to ASTM E119. The time temperature curves from this standard require the samples to be exposed to temperatures around 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit for several hours. And as we all agree, the steel applied met those specifications. Additionally, I think we can all agree that even unfireproof steel will not melt until reaching red-hot temperatures of nearly 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This story just does not add up. If steel from those buildings did soften or melt, I'm sure we can all agree that this was certainly not due to jet fuel fires of any kind, let alone the briefly burning fires in those towers. That fact should be of great concern to all Americans. Alternatively, the contention that this steel did fall at temperatures around 250 degrees Celsius suggests that the majority of deaths on September 11th were due to a safety-related feature. That suggestion should be of great concern to my company. The issue of the World Trade Center's collapse is at the crux of the story of September 11th. Ryan's statements directly contradict claims from the government and so-called experts stating that 2,000-degree heat inside the World Trade Center caused the towers to collapse. Days after writing this letter, Kevin Ryan was fired from his position. The collapse of the World Trade Center was picked up by Columbia University's observatory in Palisades, New York, 21 miles north of the World Trade Center. The South Tower registered as a 2.1 earthquake. The North Tower registered as a 2.3 earthquake. Won Young Kim told the American Free Press that their seismographs pick up underground explosions from a quarry 20 miles away. These blasts are caused by 80,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate and cause local earthquakes between magnitude 1 and 2. The 1993 truck bomb at the World Trade Center did not register because it was not coupled to the ground. And yet, on September 11th, both towers registered a magnitude 2 earthquake. In November 2001, Lerner Lamb said, during the collapse, most of the energy of the falling debris was absorbed by the towers and the neighboring structures, converting them into rubble and dust, or causing other damage, but not causing significant ground shaking. Mark Loiseau, the president of Controlled Demolition Incorporated, told the American Free Press that in the basements of the World Trade Center, where 47 central support columns were connected to the bedrock, hot spots of literally molten steel were discovered more than a month after September 11th. These incredibly hot areas were found at the bottom of the elevator shafts of the main towers, down 7 basement levels. The molten steel was found 3, 4, and 5 weeks later, when the rubble was being removed. He said that molten steel was also found at World Trade Center 7. The highest temperature was in the east corner of the South Tower, where a temperature of 1,377 degrees Fahrenheit was recorded. The molten steel in the basement was more than double that temperature. Do you still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center? In all the videos of the collapses, explosions can be seen bursting from the buildings 20 to 30 stories below the demolition wave. Here, 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 and here. Etienne Sauret was filming her documentary, WTC the First 24 Hours, and caught both collapses on tape. Watch carefully. The tripod shakes exactly 9 seconds before the tower begins collapsing, and a small piece of debris is knocked off of the right-hand side of the building. Not to mention this video of the second impact. An explosion is clearly seen bursting from the building more than 50 feet from the crash. You're probably asking, if there were bombs in the building, how would they get in there without anyone noticing? Ben Fountain, a financial analyst who worked in the World Trade Center, told People magazine that in the weeks before 9/11, there were numerous unannounced and unusual drills where sections of both the Twin Towers and Building 7 were evacuated for security reasons. Scott Forbes, an employee that worked at Fiduciary Trust in the South Tower, told Victor Thorne of Wing TV that his company was given 3 weeks advance notice that New York's Port Authority would take out power in the South Tower from the 48th floor up. The reason given was that the Port Authority was performing a cabling upgrade to increase the WTC's computer bandwidth. Forbes stated that a power down had never been initiated prior to this occasion. As a result of having its electricity cut, the World Trade Center's security cameras were rendered inoperative, as were its ID systems and elevators to the upper floors. There were plenty of engineers going in and out of the World Trade Center who had free access throughout the building due to its security system being knocked out. Also, video cameras on top of the World Trade Center, which were used to feed daily images to local TV stations, were strangely inoperative on September 11th. Daria Cord, a guard in the North Tower, told Newsday that security detail was working 12-hour shifts for 2 weeks before 9/11, but on Thursday the 6th, bomb-sniffing dogs were abruptly removed from the building. So who authorized all this? President Bush's brother, Marvin, is a principal at Securicom, a company that provides security for United Airlines, Dulles International Airport, and from the early 1990s up to 9/11, the World Trade Center. If only we could examine the debris from the World Trade Center and figure out what happened. Unfortunately, most of it was immediately shipped out of the country to be melted down. Maybe we should ask Controlled Demolition Incorporated, who was responsible for cleaning up after both September 11th and the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. But I think the answer is simple enough. What happened on September 11th was a carefully planned, controlled demolition. It was a psychological attack on the American people, and it was pulled off with military precision. (10:06 a.m., Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Flight 93 was en route from New Jersey to California with 45 passengers when it went off course at 8:56 in northeastern Ohio. According to the official story, a group of passengers, led by Todd Beamer's cry of "Let's roll," overpowered the hijackers and forced the plane into the ground. However, eyewitness testimony and physical evidence paint a much different picture. Let's start with the eyewitnesses. Westmoreland County received a call at 9:58 from somebody claiming to be aboard Flight 93. He said he was locked in a bathroom and told dispatchers that the plane was hijacked. He said he felt the plane going down, heard an explosion, and saw white smoke in the cabin. The line went dead shortly thereafter. Eric Peterson of Lambertsville was working with a friend in his auto shop when Flight 93 flew overhead. It was going end over end and then dropped below a tree line and exploded. Peterson saw a flash and then a mushroom cloud of smoke. There was a crater in the ground that was really burning. There were pieces of fuselage and clothing all over the area, burning. He said he didn't see any debris longer than a couple feet long. A caller to the Howard Stern show explicitly describes what happened.
Hey, this is Al, bud. Listen, I live in Somerset, Pennsylvania, just outside of Shanksville. We heard a plane, a low-level plane. And when we heard an explosion, saw smoke coming from the plane in the air, and then there was two other planes that passed right over top of it.
Yeah, our plane shot it down.
And a number of eyewitnesses all agree on one thing. Susan McLuane, who lives 2 miles from the crash site, saw a white plane rocket 40 or 50 feet over her minivan. It came right over me. It was so low I ducked. It was traveling real fast, but it didn't make any sound. Then it disappeared behind some trees. A few seconds later, I heard this great explosion and saw this fireball rise up over the trees, so I figured it had crashed. I didn't think much more about it until the authorities started to say that there had been no other plane. The plane I saw was heading right to the point where Flight 93 crashed, and must have been there at the very moment it went down. There's no way I imagined this plane. It was so low it was virtually on top of me. It was white, with no markings, but it was definitely military. It just had that look. It had 2 rear engines, a big fin on the back like a spoiler on the back of the car, and with 2 upright fins at the side. I haven't found one like it on the internet. It definitely wasn't one of those executive jets. The FBI came and talked to me and said that there was no plane around. Then they changed their story and tried to say it was a plane taking pictures of the crash 3,000 feet up. But I saw it, and it was there before the crash, and it was 40 feet above my head. They did not want my story. Nobody here did. Lee Purbaugh also saw the white jet. Yes, there was another plane. I didn't get a good look, but it was white and it circled the area about twice and then flew over the horizon. Tom Spinelli was working at India Lake Marina, a mile and a half away. I saw the white plane. It was flying around all over the place like it was looking for something. I saw it before and after the crash. The FBI's later explanation for the white jet was that a passing civilian Fairchild Falcon 20 jet was asked to descend from 34,000 feet to 5,000 feet some minutes after the crash to give coordinates for the site. The plane and the pilot have never been produced or identified. Susan McLuhan says a Falcon 20 was not the plane she saw. But enough of the eyewitnesses. What about the physical evidence?
The debris here is spread over a 3 to 4 mile radius, which has now been completely sealed off and is being treated, according to the FBI, as a crime scene. Governor Tom Ridge made some remarks earlier at a press conference. He had flown over the site. He said the emergency response here was immediate. He also said, and I don't know whether or not you all are able to see pictures of this, but this is one of those cases where the pictures really do tell the story, that sort of the most horrifying aspect of this particular crash scene is how little debris is visible. There is a large crater in the ground, and I'm hoping that you all are seeing it as I'm talking about it, but that's really all you see is a large crater in the ground and just tiny, tiny bits of debris. There has been at least one report that the investigators out there, and there are hundreds of them, as I said tonight, have found nothing larger than a phone book.
Light debris from the plane was scattered up to 8 miles away, and a section of engine weighing a ton was located 2,000 yards, over a mile from the crash site. But perhaps the most shocking evidence of all is that at the crash site itself, there is absolutely no trace of Flight 93, nothing but a large crater. Fox News interviews a photographer live at the Shanksville crash site.
I want to get quickly to Chris Kanicki. He's a photographer with the Pittsburgh affiliate of Fox affiliate. He was back there just a couple of minutes ago, and Chris, I've seen the pictures. It looks like there's nothing there except for a hole in the ground.
Basically, that's right. The only thing you could see from where we were was a big gouge in the earth and some broken trees. We could see some people walking around in the area, but from where we could see, there wasn't much left.
Any large pieces of debris at all?
No, there was nothing that you could distinguish that a plane had crashed there.
Smoke, fire?
Nothing. It was absolutely quiet. It was actually very quiet. Nothing going on down there, no smoke, no fire. Just a couple of people walking around. They look like part of the NTSB crew walking around looking at the pieces.
How big would you say that hole was?
From my estimates, I would guess it was probably about 20 to 15 feet. Long and probably about 10 feet long or 10 feet wide.
What could you see on the ground, if anything, other than dirt and ash? And
you couldn't see anything. You could just see dirt, ash, and people walking around, broken trees.
Chris Bolin visited Somerset County to investigate what really happened to Flight 93. Nina Lensbauer told Bolin that the hole was 5 to 6 feet deep and smaller than the 20-foot trailer in her front yard. She described hearing an explosion, like an atomic bomb, not a crash. Lensbauer told Bolin that she did not see any evidence of a plane then or at any time during the excavation of the site, an effort that reportedly recovered 95% of the plane and 10% of the human remains. If the government is lying about Flight 93, is it implausible to suggest that the rest of the story is also a lie? Whenever this evidence is presented to people, you'll get one of many different questions. The first one being, if different planes were used, what happened to the original ones? Unfortunately, there is no way to know what really happened. However, if we could look at the black boxes from the planes, we could prove that they weren't the original flights. A commercial plane carries 2 different black boxes. According to the FBI, 7 out of 8 of the black boxes were damaged beyond repair. However, the FBI claims to have found the passport of Satam al-Sakami, which managed to fly out of his pocket, through the explosion, and onto the streets of Manhattan below. So what's in a black box? A CSMU, Crash Survivable Memory Unit, which is housed inside a stainless steel shell comprised of titanium and a high-temperature insulation of silica. It's designed to withstand heat up to 2,000 degrees for an hour, immersion in salt water, jet fuel, and other liquids for 30 days, and an impact of 3,400 Gs. A black box holds one of two different recorders, a cockpit voice recorder and a flight data recorder. The cockpit voice recorder records sounds from inside the cockpit, as well as engine noise, stall warnings, and other sounds of interest. Communications between air traffic control, weather briefings, and conversations between pilots and crew are also recorded. The flight data recorder records at least 28 different parameters, such as time, altitude, speed, and heading. Some also record more than 300 other in-flight characteristics, anything from autopilot to smoke alarms. The recorders themselves are made from the most indestructible alloys known to man, and the information is marked into the alloy, along with date and time, and spooled into a continuous roll. Any damage that is incurred to the roll is done to the outside, as opposed to the inside where the data is. So, to sum up, 7 different black boxes, made from the most resilient materials known to man, were all completely destroyed beyond repair. Yet, a passport, made from a fragile material known as paper, managed to fly through a 2,000-degree explosion and land undamaged blocks away, where the FBI conveniently found it, thereby incriminating Saddam al-Sakami and al-Qaeda for the attacks. Who writes this stuff? Next question, what about the cell phone calls?
And tonight we're getting reports of cell phone calls from at least 3 of those 4 flights, 1 from a flight attendant and 2 from passengers that were on board the flights. And they all talk about knives. There's, again, no mention of guns. In the first case, it was that flight that came out of Boston, and that was an United Airlines flight, and it was a flight attendant who apparently got a cell phone call off. I've heard variously it was to American Airlines operations or maybe somewhere else, but she reported that her fellow attendants had been stabbed in the back of the plane and that the cabin had been taken over, and up front that the crew of the plane had been taken over, and that the plane was going down in New York, was the quote that we heard.
Several of these calls are extremely peculiar. Flight attendant Madeline Sweeney allegedly talked with her ground manager, Michael Woodward, for 25 minutes until the plane crashed. Near the end, she says, "I see buildings. Water. Oh my God," as if she had never seen the Manhattan skyline before in her life. A man claiming to be Mark Bingham called his mother, Alice, who was visiting his sister-in-law. His sister took the call and gave it to Alice. The caller says, "Mom, this is Mark Bingham. When was the last time you called your mother and used your full name?" The caller continues, "I'm on a flight from Newark to San Francisco, and there are 3 guys who have taken over the plane, and they say they have a bomb. Who are these guys?" The caller pauses, and then, "You believe me, don't you?" "Yes, Mark, I believe you. But who are these guys?" After a pause, the line went dead. A man claiming to be Todd Beamer got through to a Verizon supervisor, telling of 3 hijackers armed with knives, one claiming to have a bomb. 13 minutes later, he recites the 23rd Psalm of the Bible and drops the phone, turning to utter his rallying cry, "Let's roll." Why would Beamer spend the last minutes of his life talking to a complete stranger, as opposed to a member of his own family? The remaining calls were short, no more than a couple sentences, before saying they had to go, calling back a couple minutes later. But the most important evidence is an experiment conducted by A.K. Dudney of Physics911.net. In a series of experiments called Project Achilles, Dudney took 5 different cell phones onto a Cessna 172 to determine the success rate as the plane got higher in altitude. At an altitude of 4,000 feet, he had a 0.4 success rate. At an altitude of 8,000 feet, he had a 0.1 success rate. At an altitude of 32,000 feet, Dudney calculated a 0.006 probability of cell phone calls getting through, less than a 1 in 100 chance. The majority of the cell phone calls made on September 11th were made at cruising altitude, meaning the plane was traveling at 33,000 feet at 500 miles per hour. The cell phone calls were fake, no ifs, ands, or buts. I can hear you asking, how is it possible to fake a person's voice? In 1999, the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico revealed their voice morphing technology. General Carl W. Steiner, the former Commander-in-Chief of United States Special Operations Command, declared on tape, "Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government." By taking just a 10-minute sample of somebody's voice, the scientists are able to create an almost perfect copy. Another example was Colin Powell saying, "I am being treated well by my captors." So what about the hijackers? It's the funniest thing. but at least 9 of them are still alive. Walid al-Shari is a Saudi Airlines pilot in Casablanca, Morocco. Wael M. al-Shari is alive and well. Abdulaziz al-Amari is a Saudi Airlines pilot living in Saudi Arabia. Mohand al-Shari is alive in Saudi Arabia. Khalid al-Madar is a computer programmer in Mecca. Salam al-Hamzi works at a chemical plant in Yanbo, Saudi Arabia. Saeed al-Ghamdi is training to be a pilot in Tunis. Ahmed al-Nami is an administrative supervisor for Saudi Airlines. And last but not least, Mohammed Atta's father claimed to receive a phone call from his son on September 12th. 14 of the hijackers based their training in Florida, and the 5 that allegedly hijacked Flight 77 lived in a motel right outside the gates of the NSA. Not to mention, the official autopsy report for Flight 77 does not list the hijackers. And the opening paragraph makes no mention of their absence. After these discrepancies were pointed out, FBI Director Robert Mueller brushed it off, saying that the hijackers were using stolen passports and may not have had tickets, so there's no way to know who they actually were. So, if there's no proof that the hijackers were members of Al-Qaeda, or if they were even on the plane in the first place, what justification do we have for bombing Afghanistan? Oh, that's right. The Bin Laden confession tape. On December 14th, 2001, the government released a tape, allegedly of Bin Laden confessing to the attacks of September 11th, which they claimed to find in a house in Kandahar, Afghanistan. Except there's a number of things wrong with this tape. 1. The tape itself is of very poor quality. And 2. The man in the video looks and acts nothing like Bin Laden. According to the FBI's website, Osama is left-handed. Yet, in this video, he's writing a note with his right hand. Not to mention, he's wearing a gold ring and watch, which is forbidden by Islamic law, and is also never mentioned in the FBI's description of him. Compare this video to 4 other pictures of Bin Laden. Does anybody else see a problem here? Until the government can prove without a shadow of a doubt that Al-Qaeda was behind September 11th, the American people have every reason to believe otherwise. I know that it's hard to imagine that our own government would murder almost 3,000 innocent people. But once you begin to accept that possibility, you can no longer go back to the 19 Arabs, or melting trusses, or let's roll. The official story becomes the conspiracy theory. America has been hijacked, not by Al-Qaeda, not by Osama bin Laden, but by a group of tyrants, ready and willing to do whatever it takes to keep their stranglehold on this country. So what are we going to do about it? Are we going to sit down and take it, or are we going to stand up and fight for what little freedoms we have left? The story of Flight 93 is a perfect metaphor for the state of this country. A group of heroes, willing to sacrifice themselves for the good of the nation, voted to take matters into their own hands, no matter the consequences. The time has come. Let's roll.